What is up? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to God's Got It. Molly and I are excited to come here today and chat with you guys with beautiful, open, and humble hearts. Just catch you up on where God has us right now, where He's moving in our lives, and just kind of taking you all on the journey with us. Hello, Molly.
Hello. I feel like we just did so much good, juicy catching up that, like, as we were talking, having like different conversations that were moving different directions, I was like, ooh, we should be recording. Ooh, we should be recording. But yeah, the truth of today's episode is that we are really in a season of allowing God to guide us in a direction that we couldn't have seen coming 6 months ago or a year and a half ago when we first decided to team up together and start doing retreats, and then decided on the podcast and launched the ministry. It's like you never ever go into these creative and entrepreneurial and God guided creations with the expectation that it may only be for a season. And with my announcement of finally becoming pregnant after 5 years of trying, and really just feeling like we were hitting our heads against a wall of what the next season of God's Got It and Living Liberated looked like, we came to this beautiful, conscious, but really difficult conversation of admitting to each other that it just felt like God was asking us to put it down. And it's been a process to admit that to ourselves, admit that to one another. And also, we've kind of landed on this mantra of like, there are no rules. Like, we make the rules and it is all God's will. And it felt hard to say, like, we're gonna shut our business down. It felt easier to say that it's just a not right now. And we don't know. Like, we don't know if we'll pick back up the podcast, or if in a year from now, when I'm 6, 7, 8 months postpartum, we'll be ready to do another retreat, or we'll feel inspired just through our friendship to launch another version of our ministry or a group space. Like, there's been so many ideas and opportunities and potentials floating around inside of this relationship. But when we really got to the core of what we were both feeling in this season, it was like, you have to pause and you have to be willing to trust, and you have to be willing to put it down, even if it feels sticky or scary or uncertain, or like we never saw it coming.
Yeah, totally. I learned a new word in the Bible not that long ago. I can't remember if I shared it on here or not, but it was Salah. And it's throughout the Bible and a lot of the hymns or the Psalms rather. And it was to take a sacred pause. And I think that's just a beautiful way that I'm interpreting it right now.
Yeah.
Because we don't know, the reality is we don't know where God is guiding us. But we've been deeply convicted in this moment that it's really important and feels really true, right? For you, Molly, to be taking this time to just bask in the beauty and experience of motherhood and pregnancy. And myself as well, as I'm building this insurance agency, and just being able to give that the attention that God is asking me to. And God has been, I haven't shared too much about my insurance journey, but getting my license in the process was just so God guided the entire time, and knowing He's wanting me to step fully into ownership of that. It just makes sense in this moment and this season for us to reassess. I say reassess, but also just be in the space of being fully present in what God has going on in our lives right now.
Yeah.
For you, motherhood, for me, building my insurance agency, that's where it is right now. That's where God has us. And being able to lay down, I don't want to say our business was a distraction, because this has been so fun and the lives that we have impacted, but not super clear, not a ton of clarity around a lot of the areas.
Yeah.
And noticing that times it was feeling harder
Yeah.
then maybe if God was fully in it and that's where we were meant to be, that it would be,
And
you know.
I feel like that's such an interesting thing to admit to, right? Because it's not all one thing. It's not all, it was hard and it was feeling forced and we weren't certain, because the reality is the start of our business, when we planned the first retreat to Italy, it was just flowing and there were so many synchronicities and God's hand was like fully on that process. And then maybe we had like the excitement up under us and Costa Rica started to feel a little bit more forced, but still saying yes to that led to an incredible experience and incredible relationships and a bond between the women who came to that retreat that was so needed for them, right? And it's so interesting because when we decided to go all in on launching the God's Got It podcast, like it just, I remember being in that room in South Carolina recording, and there was just the Holy Spirit was there. Like we were just so filled with this energy of this is exactly where we're supposed to be. This is exactly what we're supposed to be doing. These are the conversations we're meant to be having. And we've received so much feedback in the 6 short months that we have been doing this podcast of like, thank you for having this conversation in this way. Like, wow, this is really landing for me in a new way, or I've never heard this talked about in this way before. And it's opening new doors. I mean, we had people reach out who decided to buy their first Bibles, who were learning to pray for the first time, who were just being given a permission slip we didn't even know we were offering to enter into a relationship with God that looks different than maybe what the expectation of what it had to look like was. And I think the humbling part of that is God had his hand all over every second of it, even if it was only meant to be here for this season.
Yeah.
And I think that's hard sometimes for us to admit. We assume or we expect, I think, especially as entrepreneurs, that we're going to find like that thing, right? The thing that I'm going to do for the rest of my career, right? And something that's so beautiful about actually being in this space of like God-led and God-centered entrepreneurship is the surrender to some things are only meant to be for a season. And we don't know why that is. We don't know why he wanted us to be the vessels that he asked us to be for the last 6 months through these conversations, or the web that that's weaved for the people who got to receive these conversations, right? What it did to our hearts and our minds and our relationship with him. Like we don't get to know the full picture, but we get to feel the reality that this is where we were called, and now we're being called in a different direction, and it's a different season. And there's a certain beauty to the willingness to let go of this idea of permanence, right? That like if I start something, it has to continue on forever or it's a failure. And I know we've both moved through that in our conversations and in our own way, is like no part of us feels like setting this down right now means that we failed as business owners or as entrepreneurs or as podcasters. It just is what it is, and it's giving a new lens to what it means to be in a space of creation with God.
Yeah, I love that you name that, because I would be lying if I didn't have a moment when we were having these conversations of that grieving of like, another thing, why hasn't this worked for me? And I had to have a quick sit down with God of like, no part of this has been a failure. You know, we've hosted 2 international retreats and have brought so many women through some amazing healing experiences, like you named, through our ministry, the conversations we've had, the women that have started to engage in a relationship with God. I mean, and I was looking, this is what, like our 17th or 18th episode? Like some people who set out to do a podcast do like 1 or 2 episodes and then they're like, all right, never mind. Like we have been doing the work. We've been showing up, and no part of that, if I really sit honestly with it, has been a failure at all. Like we have a podcast. Like what?
Right.
We're out on the YouTube, on the Spotify. People are hitting you up in the DM. Like, I love that conversation. Like, people have been changed through God, through these experiences that we've created. And like, how can I be mad about that?
Yeah. And I think that's why, especially when it comes to the podcast, for anyone listening, it feels, we don't know, right? Like we don't have a like, hey, we're putting this down and we'll be picking it up exactly 3 months after I give birth. Like we don't know what it's going to look like, but there's a reason. There's definitely some reason why it doesn't feel like it's goodbye. It's just a see you later. And we even talked about, we're like, do we call this the end of season 1? And like, there will, but we don't know, will there be a season 2? And it's such an interesting place to be when you're really learning to let go of control of the plans of the future and what it's all supposed to look like, and trust that if and when we're meant to pick the podcast back up, that it'll be so God guided, and he'll be like, okay, now's time, and here's the topic, and here's how we're going to get back into it, and this is what it's going to look like in this season. And my heart is so open to that. And I feel like it's because of the level of consciousness that we have always attended to our friendship and our business with, right? Like, it was hard to go into that. I felt like I was processing like breaking up with a boyfriend when I was like, we really need to talk about what this is going to look like. And I had so much like guilt and shame and uncertainty. And it was just so beautiful to come into that conversation and be met with you being such an open vessel for God too, and being like, no, I feel this too. And like, it's not just about you, it's about what's going on in my life as well. It's not just about my pregnancy and motherhood, although that's a huge aspect of this. Like, I'm really, for me in this season, I'm not just surrendering what we've been doing in business, I'm surrendering my role as a creator, entrepreneur, and provider completely, like really surrendering fully into the season of full-time pregnancy and then motherhood, and having no idea what that's going to all look or feel like. But there's been so much beautiful conscious processing of how we've been conditioned and what success is meant to look like. And alongside that, I personally have begun to feel so much peace in the shedding that God is asking me to do. And I don't feel like I would be this peaceful if it weren't for how deeply conscious and connected like our relationships and conversations around it all has been, right? Because it could have been, I mean, I think about when you have to have a hard conversation with somebody and you go through all those scenarios of like, they're going to be mad, or they're going to get angry, or it's going to be a fight, or it's going to be a this. And there was just none of that, just this open-hearted, like, yeah, I feel that too. And it doesn't feel like a goodbye. It just feels like this is where God's got us. And if we're going to follow with the flow of the truth of what we've been talking about on this podcast for the last 6 months, can we trust that God's got us, even here, even in this season where we have no control over what the future of this creation looks like?
Yeah. And, I love that we are really going all in on the trusting of God here, because I think if we had continued on like pushing through and ignoring the feelings that we were having around this, like, no, because we got to keep going, we got to push, we got to grind, we got to do the next thing, people are asking about it, it would be going against everything that we've been trying to share here, and like what it looks like to really have that embodied relationship with God. And so I guess anyone who's listening, like letting this, maybe even if it needs to be your permission slip, to sit things down if you're feeling it's not aligned and you're getting this like hard nudge from God, and those stories that are arising like, oh, what is this going to mean about me? What are people going to think? And ultimately, like, if it's not in God's will, can you, even as scary as it may be, can you sit that down?
Mm-hmm. And I think even sometimes the things that God aren't in God's will in this season, our ego sometimes can still have a really hard time letting go of it, right? Because it's like, oh, I didn't see this one coming. Or like, we just got started in this thing. We just invested in this thing. Like, we had an employee. There was a lot of things we had to think about in working pieces to really make this decision that we both felt so guided to. And it can be really hard for the plans that our ego had of what it was all supposed to look like, or what it was all going to turn into, to surrender to that will of God and trust, like, hey, we're being brought in a completely different direction than what we could have expected. But what does true surrender look like? And true surrender in this season is allowing ourselves to let go and trust God even more deeply in whatever it is that he has around the corner. I mean, I know we can see bits and pieces of it, right? Like, I have a growing belly, there's a baby coming. Like, I know a little bit about what's around the corner, but I have no idea why he's asking me to step into motherhood fully, right? There are plenty of women who continue on with their entrepreneurial journeys. And I know for me, this process of us having these conversations and setting this all down and setting down my relationship with social media, my relationship as a creator, my relationship with money, right? And being a provider for my entire life. I've been going through a deep internal like death process of letting go of what does it mean about me if I'm not constantly creating, if I'm not producing, if I'm not providing, who am I without these things? And it's been really difficult to come up with a lot of like come up against a lot of that societal conditioning that says that only this one way of being in life is the way, right? There's only one way to success, and it is to continue to push and continue to grind and continue to hustle. Meanwhile, the um lesson that God has for me in this season is like there's a softer way if you want it. And that's not what everybody's going to want, and that's not everybody's trajectory, but right now in this season it is yours. Are you willing to accept the challenge of allowing yourself to soften and to let go and to slow down?
Yeah. And you know, I've talked a bit about this too. One of the stories that kept coming up for me is like, oh, look, it's another thing that you've failed at. You know, maybe this like trying to do the entrepreneurial life just isn't for you. And that's the big story that I've been having to unravel in the midst of all of this, right? Like never really saw my business pop off online like all these other, you know, people. Why not me? And then, you know, going into this and now it, you know, from an outsider looking at it might be like another thing they're not following through with or whatever. So, yeah, I hear you in that, just the wild stories and like the emotions that live in our body and how we have to move through those and lean into God's truth, not necessarily what I'm telling myself all of the time. It's been fun. It's been a really fun and a fun journey for sure. But I know that in, you know, closing this chapter of the book is just a deeper invitation from God that he's been you know, lightly nudging at me for quite some time. And he's never going to be a pushy God. You know what I mean? He's just like here and gently waiting for me.
Your curious
I was just reading Revelation this morning where he was talking about like, you know, anybody who knocks at the door, like I'm here and I'll have a meal with you. Um, so I'm just heavily leaning into this state of like, what would it look like to go all the way in and having to be really honest with myself about some of these endeavors that I've taken on and have I given my 100% because I've been so deeply ingrained in the hustle boss babe culture. And as much as I feel like I've tried to deprogram that, I can still notice when situations arise where I still fall into that. And having to be really honest of if I'm giving only, you know, if I'm pulling myself in all these different directions because I'm chasing success, I'm chasing money in this performative nature, well, they're only all getting like a 30% here and a 40% here and a 20% here. And I don't even know if that added up to 100%, but you know what I mean? Like I have yet to find myself where I've said, I'm 100% on this thing
on this
and that
thing.
be the thing on this one thing. I'm being asked to sit with that's like a lack of trust in God and his provision over my life because I'm still holding on to this story that I have to be bringing in multiple streams of income from all these different places to be safe. And so I think us stepping into closing this chapter has like just peeled away another layer of that for me being invited to sit with of when are we gonna sit this down?
Yeah. Like when I closed this one chapter of this potential stream of income or this place where I was pouring a good chunk of my energy and not pick something else up.
Right.
Like allow that energy to be poured into, like you said, the life insurance business that you're building. And that brings me to another thing that I was thinking about as far as I think sometimes people who are really, really drawn to doing the work of God, right? And like spreading the word of God and helping people heal home to God, we feel like our mission and our ministry has to be this outright, like, I have a podcast that's talking about God, or I do retreats where I'm helping women heal home to God, or I have a ministry where I'm talking to women and having conversations about God. And I think something that I'm realizing through this season is that our ministry can be in so many different places. And I for some reason, I see it so much more clearly for other people than I can often see it for myself. And I see that so clearly for you right now in the potential of the pocket that you can carve out for yourself inside of the industry where you're building this business, right? Where like women do want to do it differently. And how can I bring God into this, and trusting God in pouring provision through this thing that he's called me to do, but beyond the hustle and force culture of me having to be the thing that's constantly producing. And yeah, I just think that's a lesson. I mean, I want to say for like women, but just humans in general. I know we were talking earlier before we got on just about the truth of womanhood and the reality that we have been raised and, let's be honest, indoctrinated into a male dominated culture where hustle and grind and push and force and that exerting the same amount of energy every single day is what is expected of us in order to create a level of financial success or entrepreneurial success inside of your career, right? And it takes a lot of internal work to do the undoing necessary to actually accept the reality of peace that can come from doing things in a more feminine way, doing things in a more relaxed way, doing things in a more cyclical and intuitive way, right? And it feels so scary to claim that, to know it, but then also to implement what it takes to actually be those change makers, right? For women who are feeling really guided by God and by their intuition to do things differently, that we have to change the way that we're working because the way we're working isn't working for us, right? And stop comparing ourselves to men who are built to do things differently, right? And stop trying to live on this equal trajectory where we're consistently putting out this same level of output that maybe actually makes them really happy, but burns us the heck out, right? And I'm feeling that so much as I'm stepping into motherhood. I went through this whole internal process of like, who am I if I'm not providing? Like, my life is worthless if I'm just sitting here and all I'm doing is making a baby. And it was my husband, time and time again, that he was like, your body's making a human. Like, why can't that be enough for you right now? Like, if we're good and I can provide, and I am so happy to do that and so happy to allow you this experience of just being fully in your pregnancy and then stepping into motherhood and choosing the choice of like, hey, I'll be the provider here. Why can't that be enough for you? Right? And it's because it's just so deeply indoctrinated into us that our worth is our hustle, it is our production, it is our output, and it is not small work to actually be the change makers who are undoing that and choosing to live a different way while society is still going in this trajectory that says like, no, this is the only way to live, right? And we're talking about that in two different ways. You from saying, I'm going to put down all these other things and just focus on building this one thing, but building it in a way that feels good for my life as a woman. And then same for me, like, hey, I'm actually going to put all of myself into motherhood and reclaim that as the like sacred and beautiful role that it is, and trust in where God's guiding me inside of that, and not live from my fear that I have to be doing X, Y, and Z on top of being a mother, just because that's the way it's always been done and always been like presented to me, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, again, the word just keeps coming up as permission slip. And I think that's been our goal from the beginning of creating these spaces, is like getting to go against the grain, go against this major programming that has been thrown at us. And like, what could your life look like if you co-created it with God, rather than Sally telling you to do this, or, you know, Joshua over here telling you to do that, and like, this is the way it should be. And actually like, no, no. And can that be okay? That there really are no rules. I'm here, I'm in this situation, and it's a fluid relationship that I'm having with my God on how I, want to live. And it's so hard. It is really hard. I think I was sharing with you right before we got on this call. I got off of a meeting and they're talking about these people, and they want to promote and talk about the success that these people are having. And I can't help but sit and think that if you are up and working at 7 or 8 a.m. and you're working till 1 o'clock in the morning, like, that can't be the only way to success. And yet here we are still as a society, and at the time of this recording, 2026, and we're still promoting that so heavy and hard. Like, be the hardest worker in the room, be the first one to show up, be the last one to leave, but where are you living in any of that?
Yeah. Is there room for
Where
God
are you
in that?
living? Yeah. I've lived in Maryland for 42 years now. And there's this show that happens every single year. The Blue Angels, they come for the Naval Academy graduation. And every single year that it has come up, people have asked me, do you want to go? Do you want to go? And every single year of my life since I've been working, I have said, no, I have to work. No, I'm working. No, sorry, I'm working. And finally, this year, I was asked to go, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take off work and I'm going to go. And I know that seems like so small, but it was like huge for me. And as I was sitting there and I was getting ready to go on this boat ride and be with friends, I started crying. I'm just like weeping and like, thank you, God. And I'm sitting there watching the show, and people will send me videos, and I look like a child who's just seeing something for the first time, because and I just had such a wonder about my face. And there's a sadness that I waited that long. But also with that came a beautiful revelation on the other side of like, I'm tired of waiting. Like, I'm in life right now. And so when there are these moments to be with loved ones, to go experience something, I'm not going to say anymore, no, sorry, I have to work. Work is going to have to wait, because I am here to live this life and be in the awe and wonder that God has created. And I don't know, I hit a turning point on that last week, and I'm just kind of tying it into this, like, I'm choosing joy. I'm deciding to consciously choose joy moving forward, even if it looks like it's going against the grain. And that is what this mission of this business has always been about. Really being able to tune in and be a human, and you're around all these experiences, and can you get quiet and get into the space where you are hearing where God is asking you to go? And that was a long-winded saying.
Even having that experience the other day, right, of finally saying yes to this thing you've always wanted to do, that you've always said no to, that can sound so simple to anybody listening, but was like a big aha moment for you. It's like, who's to say that God wasn't the one that's like, you have to say yes, so that you can have this experience of realizing that it is only you that's keeping you from saying yes to these experiences that I'm handing you, that you're choosing to say no to because you feel like you have to push them off into some distant future where you may have more money or feel more successful or feel like you have achieved enough to finally allow yourself to say yes to these experiences. And if we are truly, like, truly living in surrender to our relationship with God, can we trust that wherever it is that He is guiding us to go, even if it is to like quit your freaking job and go in a completely different direction, that He is the one that is providing, that you are not the one who is providing it. And it is not an easy thing, like I said, to do the work of undoing that allows you to actually become the vessel to experience the reality of like, holy cow, God really does provide. He really does provide. He really does show up. He may not show up in the way that our ego thinks we need Him to in order to be completely satiated by all our material desires, right? But He does show up and provide for all of our needs when we allow the space to truly surrender into letting Him do so. But He's also, like you said, He's not a God that's going to force you in to doing it His way. He's like, you can have it your way. Like, yeah, you can push and you can force and you can stress the rest of your life if you want to, but I'm going to continue to invite you into these experiences that might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but are actually going to get you to that place you want to go, right? And I keep saying, I've had a lot of people reaching out to me like, oh, how's pregnancy? And I am really grateful to be surrounded by a lot of conscious women who understand that pregnancy is like an entire journey, right? Like, there is a shedding, there is an undoing, there is a complete change that's happening, not only in the size of my body and that there's a baby growing in it, but in my identity and my psyche and my emotions and like where I'm pointing my energy. And I've had so many women reaching out to me and just like, how's it going and what's coming up for you and what are you moving through? And it has been like, I have never in my life felt closer to God than I do right now. And my biggest response to all of these women who are reaching out and asking me these questions, I mean, of course, I have had body image stuff come up. I have had entrepreneurial identity stuff come up, worthiness come up, like so many things. But something that's so beautiful that's been coming up is I finally feel like I am landing in the life I've always meant to have, and it doesn't look anything like I expected it would when I started out on my entrepreneurial journey 5 years ago, right? Like when I left nursing, I was chasing happiness, but my happiness was directly tied to how much I could produce, how many clients I could get, how much money I could make. And I had a season of being really successful in that. But in that season of being really successful of that, I also had awakening after awakening of like, this ain't it. Like, I still don't feel whole. I still don't feel peaceful. I still don't feel full. And it's only been my journey home to him and fully surrendering into every little twist and turn, this being another one of them, that allows me to really take my foot off the gas of life and kind of just, I don't want to say be a passenger in the process, right? But like be a vessel for him to move through and really trust in the plan that he has for my life. And right now, like it looks so much simpler and smaller materially than I would have ever expected. And yet I feel safer and more whole and more full than I ever did when I had everything I thought I wanted materialistically.
Mm, that's really good. Yeah, it just makes me think about how good life gets to be. You know, we build up this idea in our minds, and then when we fully step into that surrender, how different it can look, but how much better
Mm-hmm.
it can actually be. And when we can soften the grip on the control of needing it to look and be a certain way and just be like, okay, like that song, like your way's better. I got
Mm-hmm.
it. Okay, your way is better. God, I got you. Your way is better. Um, just the supernatural peace and comfort that comes on the other side of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm hopeful. Um, yeah, yeah, all the things.
Yeah. And it's like an invitation, and again, we keep using this word permission slip for like let something that I have learned in fully surrendering my life to God and following Jesus and finding so much peace on this path is allowing life to be all of the things, right?
Mm.
Like we had this conversation about putting down the podcast and when our final episode would be. It's this one, guys, if you haven't picked up on that already. This is our final episode for now. And what it was all going to look like, and how we had this one conversation, and it was like in that afternoon we had spoken to our employee, we had shut down a bunch of the subscriptions that we had that were holding up the back end of our business, we had a conversation with our ministry, like it was, we had this like, oh my God, we've spent a year and a half building this thing and we tore it down in an hour. And there was so much relief in that because it is the truth of where God is guiding us to go right now, of like, okay, we've had the hard conversations, we've made the hard decisions, we've pulled the plug, and we're like letting the chips fall where they may. And there was so much grief and so much like moving through those feelings of like, oh, like, are we failing, or are we giving up too soon, or are we, like it was more than just the relief. So again, the invitation and permission slip is your journey with God, and your process of co-creating with him is not always just going to feel like joy and excitement and wonder and perfection. It's going to feel like the totality of life, which is all things. There will be a relief and a deep knowing and a deep peace amongst grief and fear of failure and uncertainty and doubt and shame and all of those things that actually get to be such a gift when they bubble to the surface, because they're pointing us in the direction of the things that are actually holding us back from an even deeper relationship with God.
Yeah. I'm in a Bible study right now, and it's all about that same concept, the duality of it, the mourning and the dancing. There will be celebrations there, but we have like this full spectrum of emotions, and there will be suffering and there will be sadness, and there also is joy and so much to celebrate. And I think that's the reality of the space that we're in right now. And I'm just so grateful for every single human who has tapped into this, whether it was coming to a retreat or being a part of our ministry or listening into this on any of the platforms that we were on, people who've been reaching out to us on Instagram and telling us how this work has impacted you. Like I just carry that with me, you know, like it's so deeply anchored in my heart that none of this was a waste. None of this was for nothing. I feel really good and at peace with the work that Molly and I have both done here. And we're just so grateful to have shared this experience with you and to keep you, you know, keep you in the loop as to whatever, whenever, if ever, you know, things if we're told to move.
Yeah, I mean, if you have been a listener of the podcast and you're not already, we will link both of our socials down below, so that you can stay in touch. Obviously, if and whenever God decides to bring us back around to this podcast, we'll be announcing it in all of those places. But yeah, it's like in this moment, it's not even feeling super, I want to say like it's a bittersweet goodbye, but it's also just like such a peace. It's more of a peaceful see you later than anything.
Totally.
We feel so whole and complete in the work that we've done and the processes it has moved us through in our relationship with one another, in our relationship with productivity, in our relationship with God and creation. And our deepest prayer is just that you received something, whether this is the first episode that you have ever listened to or you have been listening to us from the beginning. Our prayer has always from the beginning just to be vessels for his voice and to spread messages that are moving through the reality of the lives that we are living as imperfect humans who have decided to surrender fully to God and whatever that means in this life. So thank you guys so much for being here, for tuning in, for listening, for sharing, for liking, for subscribing, all the things. One thing we did definitely decide to do is leave the podcast active, so it will continue to be able to be listened to across all of the platforms. And then this way, if and when, like we said, God points us in the direction of picking it back up, even if it's just for a random episode here and there, who knows? It'll be there right where we left it.
Yeah. But thank you. We love all of you. And, you know, we're going to try it one last time, right? Until next time, I want you guys to remember God's got it. Oh my gosh, no, we're the worst. Okay, guys, that's a wrap. If today's episode spoke to you, please let us know. Leave us a comment or reach out via email.
If you know someone who would benefit from this message, please take a moment to share it with them and make sure to hit the subscribe so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks for spending time with us today. We hope you leave here reminded that whatever season you're in right now, God's got it.